Okay, welcome to MBA 507. I have a short little YouTube here demonstrating the risk reward trade off, one of our five basic principles in the Foundation of Finance text. It's from a recent article from February 7th, 2022, Bloomberg Business Week. And it is about the title is An Unlikely Airline Startup Calls Alaska Home. So until recently, wide-body jets in the 1970s, I'm sorry, until the spread of wide-body jets in the 1970s, taking a commercial trans-Pacific flight usually involved a refueling or technical stop en route, often in Alaska. Now a mix of pandemic-era entrepreneurialism and cryptocurrency fervor is birthing a new airline whose strategy is to connect leisure travelers with between the U.S. and Asia by bringing back the old stop in the 49th state. Northern Pacific Airways aims to start flying later this year, pending U.S. regulatory approval, using a single-aisle Boeing 757-200 with 197 seats, including 12 in business class. The company plans to charge 10 to 20% less than economy fares on competing nonstop routes. Okay. Its flights will connect through Anchorage, Alaska, and tourism officials hope the carrier could become a conduit for new visitors. Northern Pacific's initial route map includes the largest metro areas in Japan and South Korea: Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Seoul. In the U.S., it will fly to Las Vegas, New York, Orlando, San Francisco, and Ontario, California, just outside of LA. Again, using a secondary airport near a metropolitan area, but an hour or so drive from LA with a lot cheaper gate fees. There are a number. The numbers are there of how many travelers that are not giving any credit towards spurring new traffic. Oh, I'm sorry. The numbers are there of how many travelers there are, and that's not giving any credit towards spurring new traffic, says Rob McKinney, Chief Executive Officer at both Anchorage-based Northern Pacific and the interstate carrier Raven, Alaska, and former operations chief at Mokulele Airlines. Sounds like a Eskimo airline. I just believe that if we do things right with the right machine, that we will be a success. The startup arose from the bankruptcy ashes of Raven Air Group Inc., Alaska's largest regional airline, which filed for court bankruptcy protection in April of 2020 after the pandemic slammed air travel. Okay, so they're going to go in, buy a bunch of stuff up out of a bankruptcy, so they're getting it on the cheap. Uh, the investor group Float Alaska LLC acquired parts of that airline for $8 million in 2020 and resumed flying a slimmed down network as a Raven Alaska. The company's largest investor and chairman is Josh Jones, a serial entrepreneur and cryptocurrency investor from LA. Jones has left his mark on the carrier, which will offer a crypto-based loyalty program, Flycoin, aimed at inducing customers' loyalty by offering elite status based on how many coins a customer has and how long the customer has held them. The coins will translate to flight vouchers on Northern Pacific. So they're trying to build brand loyalty by rewarding people with upgrades and free air miles. The Flycoin loyalty program recently raised $33 million from venture capital investors, and the airline will borrow some of that. Okay, but the company's official declined to disclose the terms of the loan. Northern Pacific itself will need to raise a total of about $100 million this year, says the chief operating officer. So the owner's got a side business here called Flycoin that's going to supplement his airline. He's got 33 million. They need 100, so they're going to have to borrow at least 70 million or issue stock for around 70 million. The concept could prove to be less risky than it seems, given the success of Icelandair Group in connecting transatlantic leisure traffic in Reykjavik and Copa Airlines' experience in the Panama connecting travelers between the Americas. So they don't have a new business model here. They're taking a business model that has been proven in transatlantic flight, North America to Europe, and North America to South America, and they're just taking that concept and taking it from North America to Asian destinations. Okay. Northern Pacific's founders are relying heavily on Icelandair as a model, betting that pricing below the existing nonstop U.S.-Asia competition can lure budget-minded travelers to stop and possibly take a stopover holiday in Alaska. It's also using an Icelandair subsidiary, Loftleiðir, to operate 3 757s for its initial Asia service. So again, they're cutting down on their investment in aircraft by leasing aircraft and the whole maintenance gamut, pilots and everything from another airline. Right now, there's a lot of excess capacity in the airline industry. The startups leaders say they're mindful of the need to avoid going head-to-head with larger competitors in the North Pacific, such as Delta, Nippon Airways, and United, and will instead appeal mostly to younger travelers seeking a bargain. Joan takes a sober view of the Northern Pacific's odds of success, calling it potentially a billion-dollar business in a few years, balanced against the risk of losing $50 to $100 million. Okay, so there's our principle that's at play here, the risk-reward trade-off. Okay, he's willing to put up $50 to $100 million in the hopes of getting $1 billion over the next several years. Okay, although international air travel is gradually rebounding from historic lows in 2020, Trans-Pacific remains the slowest market to recover because of the strict COVID controls in several countries. In December, passenger traffic between Japan and the U.S. was still 87% below the same level before the pandemic. With South Korea, it's 79% below the 2019 level. So the potential is there to really get a lot more people in a lot more airplanes. But again, everybody is waiting for the mass mandates, vaccinated, for the threat of COVID to go away. JTB Corp, Japan's largest travel agency, estimates that international travel demand will recover in the first half of 2023. So these investors are getting positioned now for a year from now. Okay. Japan may end its strict border controls at the end of February, potentially leading to a greater reopening of tourism. There's been a few flights to Alaska, so the demand could increase if flights. There have been very few flights to Alaska, so demand could increase for the public, says Chow Ying-sang, a spokesman for Hana Tour, South Korea's largest tour agency. No one knows. Again, there's the risk. You don't know. You're taking a chance. You've done your due diligence. Numbers are down compared to what they were pre-pandemic. We're near the end of the pandemic. They're getting themselves positioned, and they did so by buying a bankrupt airline and renting out equipment and flight crews from another airline. Again, to reduce the risk, reduce the cost, but they still have to come up with $100 million thereabouts. But the risk or the potential reward is tenfold, $1 billion. No, I'm sorry. Be 1,000-fold. Can't do my math in my head anymore. It's 100 million. 10 times a bit. Yeah, tenfold. 100 million to $1 billion would be a tenfold increase. Pretty nice return, but again, big risk if you lose the 50 or 100 million. I'd have to go back to work on a day job. Besides the pandemic, Northern Pacific could face other hurdles being the risk you encounter in business. When more normal travel conditions return, Chinese carriers such as Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern are apt to restore their capacity and go back to wooing budget-minded travelers with cheap one-stop connections, via Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. Moreover, Northern Pacific isn't the only startup aiming to undercut traditional carriers. On January 13th, Seoul, Korea-based Air Premia received final approval to begin nonstop flights to Los Angeles. Again, that's nonstop, from Seoul to LA. These people are going to go LA to Anchorage and then to Seoul. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but it's cheaper. And that's where they hope to make their market niche. Starting in the second quarter, it plans to fly Boeing 787-9 wide bodies, offering economy fares 20% cheaper than full-service Korean carriers. So again, we have an industry here that's been battered by the pandemic, and people getting in line, getting in position to take advantage of it once they weigh the risks and think the payoff is worth it. Just a little practical, real-world example of the risk-reward trade-off, and a little bit of numbers thrown in there to figure out how much money you're going to have to put up and the potential money you can reap if you're willing to take the risk. Okay, a little short article just to brush up and reinforce that a lot of the things we're talking about in the textbook are theoretical, but do have practical applications to them. I'll be getting something out to you, Chapter 6, I guess, over the weekend, and then the Chapter 5 solutions. Be good, stay warm, and winter's almost over. All right.